Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session Inspiring Women in Cybersecurity, a CISO's Journey to Success. And I am Ritika Chakraborty. I will be your host for the day. Before we get started, we would like to go over a few house rules for our attendees. The session will be in listen only mode and will last for an hour, out of which the last 15 minutes will be dedicated to Q&A. If you have any questions during the webinar to our organizer or our speaker, use the Q&A window. Also, if you face any audio video challenges, please check your internet connections or you may log out and log in again. Now about our speaker. Michele Myauo is a distinguished cybersecurity and IT executive, board member, speaker, and author. She has over 22 years of experience in academia, industry, and government with US intelligence community and departments including commerce, defense, energy, homeland security, and state. She has handled cybersecurity, IT system engineering, services sales, and business execution abroad. She also led the North America health and public service security industry at Accenture. As a managing director and senior security executive, she focused on supporting the healthcare industry, state and local governments, academic institutions, and non-profit organizations to innovate and accomplish more sustainable by quickly implementing safe and robust cybersecurity solutions. Before Accenture, she held leadership positions at Microsoft as Director of Cybersecurity Services Delivery for the Global Security Infrastructure practice and led the Azure Global Special Capabilities Infrastructure and Innovation Cybersecurity Group. She held cybersecurity and IT leadership positions at IBM and was a professor at George Washington University. Myauo holds a doctorate in systems engineering from George Washington University, an MS in industrial and organization psychology from the University of Baltimore, and a BS in psychology from Bethany College. She won the 2023 Global CISO Forum World 200 CIO by CISO Award. She serves on the National Cyber Watch Center, National Visiting Committee, and EC Council Global Advisory Board for CEH. Right now, without any further delay, I would hand over the mic to you, Michele.
Great, thank you, Hakrita, and thank you to EC Council. It's a real honor and privilege to be able to spend 30 to 45 minutes speaking just about my background and also providing some information about cybersecurity. So thank you for the opportunity. When I thought about today, I had many thoughts about what should I do during this time. I thought about writing a TED Talkish kind of stub speech. And then I thought about doing a presentation, and then it kind of dawned on me when I was riding my bike that maybe just have a conversation. So I'm going to kind of just treat this, I guess, as a podcast of sorts, and with two parts. The first part, I'm going to, just tell you a little bit about me and about, how I grew up and my background, because I really think, that kind of informs, kind of the direction I went in my career, and also just kind of the way I think provides a little bit more color behind that. And then the second portion, I would like to just share some information and references, and I'll talk about some of the emerging cybersecurity trends and laws and regulations and kind of what I'm seeing in the industry, if that is, so hopefully that will be useful to you all. So I'll go ahead and get started. Michele Myauo. I'm born and raised in Collinsville, West Virginia, which is a tiny little steel town near the Ohio River on the three-state border of West Virginia, Pennsylvania, near Pittsburgh, and Ohio, Steubenville, Ohio, where Dean Martin is from. So grew up, had a very joyful childhood, grew up humble means. When I was born, my parents had a trailer beside my grandparents and my great-grandma, so I got to grow up next to both of my grandparents. And I am the oldest of four. I have a brother who's 2.5 years younger than me, a sister who is 9 years younger than me, and then another sister who's 12 years younger than me. And you know, growing up, my parents were very involved in everything we did, all our sports and activities, and very, very supportive. And my parents worked in a steel mill. My dad worked in that steel mill for over 46 years. In my Wheaton Steel, it was called at the time. It no longer exists. And then my mom, she tells the story about how she was in the typist pool of the steel mill because she didn't go to, she didn't have the opportunity to go to college. She ended up getting a job in the typist pool, and she said she hated typing. She was good at it, but she hated the typist pool. So she said one day somebody came in and said, "Hey, does anybody want to do Q punching?" And she said, "I had no idea what Q punching was, but I knew that I just need to get out of there." So she raised her hand and off she went. And that launched her career in IT. So I grew up with, you know, big, huge IBM computers in our basement. And my mom would have reams of paper of ones and zeros, and she'd be going through it with her pencil and her highlighter. And, you know, at the kitchen table, and I come in and I said, "Well, what are you doing? Like, what are these things?" And she's like, "Oh, it's computers and these." I was like, "What does this do?" She's like, "Oh, it runs a steel mill." And I was like, "These ones and zeros run a steel mill?" She's like, "Yeah." And she kind of, you know, explained how the computers controlled the different machinery. And I thought that was kind of interesting, right? But I was a kid, so I was busy doing other things. I grew up cheering and dancing. My mom put me in dancing because she wanted me to not have a fear of public speaking. So I guess that worked. Apparently she had a big fear of public speaking when she was younger. And so I danced for over 20 some years. And dancing really, there's a lot of lessons from dancing that I use every day. One of which my dance teacher always said, Brenda, Casey, shout out to Brenda, that just keep dancing. Nobody knows your steps. Just keep moving and entertain the crowd. So I leveraged that today. So grew up cheering and dancing, and I also really loved art and just riding my bike and playing outside and playing in the woods, those types of things. And when it came time for college, my parents, neither of them had the opportunity to go to college. So they said, you know, we don't care where you go to college for, but you're going. And I was like, okay. So I identified psychology. I thought that was cool. I was going to be a child psychologist. I took a class in high school about psychology, and off I went to Bethany College, which kind of leads me to the second phase of kind of, you know, growth. I would say there have kind of been 4 big phases of growth in my life as I kind of look back on it. In college, I loved it. I went into college, I cheered and danced, as I mentioned, growing up. And I wasn't going to do that in college, but I wanted to do a sport. So I had seen soccer. We had a soccer team at my high school, and I thought the soccer guys were cute. So truth be told, I said, "Hey, I want to play soccer." So my high school boyfriend kind of showed me how to some soccer moves during summertime, and then I walked on to the D3 soccer team. And I mention this because I find myself that I'm very planful, and I like to have data to kind of inform my decisions, but I also really go with my gut. When I see something I know I want, I just go for it, right? And that's kind of been very consistent throughout my life. I have a very strong sense of, I want that, I'm going to go give that a shot. And that really stems from my parents saying, "Hey, you could be whatever you want to be. You just need to work hard and try and practice, and you can get there." They also said there's always somebody who's going to be worse than you at things, and there's always somebody that's going to be better. So just, you know, do the best that you can. So that's, I really kind of live by those words, and kind of doubling down on strengths, like strength finders. I really like the idea of focusing on the 80% your strength, and really double down and excel in that area while you grow in the others. So in college, met my best friends of, almost 30 years now, playing soccer. Shout out to the Zeta girls, and they're, still by my side today. So when I was in college, I said I wanted to be a child psychologist. I went and I worked at a summer camp. Me and my best friend were like, why in the world did we work at a summer camp and not go hang out and party at the beach? Don't know. But we worked at a child summer camp with children. And at the summer camp, I enjoyed the job, but I realized sad kids make me sad. I don't want to be a child psychologist anymore. So my junior year in college, I pivoted and I decided I was going to be an IO psychologist. We spend a lot of our time at work. If I could make the work world a better place, then that might just make a lot of sense, right? If I was going to spend a lot of my time at work. So that's what I did. I pursued IO psychology programs, and that brought me down to the University of Baltimore. I remember my dad moving me down into the big city with my mom. We actually, I found my roommates on through the college, sight unseen, house unseen, just showed up in the U-Haul and said, hey, I'm Michelle. They're like, gosh, we didn't know if you were going to show up or not. I hadn't been in a big city, and they were really helpful to me and kind of showing me the ropes and all the fun that could be had in the DMV, the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. And I still live there today. I live in Virginia with my son. So in grad school, I really enjoyed that program, and I got my first job down in McLean, Virginia, right by Tyson's Corner, doing assessment centers. So an IO psych gig, developing assessment centers, which is a battery of tests for police, fire, policemen, police folk, fire folk, and a lot of the government industries. Like we work with the DEA, the Library of Congress, and develop these situational exams. So like, for example, we would work with the firefighters and read through all the laws and regulations and develop test questions and then test those test questions. And some of that actually involved people going into a burn building. So a building that was on fire. We'd put on a fire hat, ride down, in the fire truck with them. The person would run in, they would assess the situation and fight the fire, and then a panel of their peers would assess the fire, assess their ability to fight the fire. And then we would take that information and we would go ahead and do mathematical calculations, right? Do some statistics on how they did. And then throw out bad test questions and things like that. I mention it because it was one of the coolest jobs, and it kind of got me into that government world with like the DEA and the Library of Congress. And also, I really enjoyed reading laws and regulations and finding out new things. So that's also really relevant to me today in the second half of the conversation. From there, I moved down to Baltimore, moved down to the DC area because it took me about 3 hours to get home one time in rain, if anybody knows DC, Virginia, Maryland traffic. And I moved in a house with 4 women that I saw in a one ad because we didn't have a lot of online. We didn't have Zillow back in those days, right? So circled with a one ad. It looks like a nice person. I'll go check out this house. So met some, lifelong friends there as well. And then I'll kind of transition a little bit more into kind of my working life. So that's a little bit about my background and childhood and just kind of the way I tend to operate. So I started at Booz Allen Hamilton, working at the National Reconnaissance Office in security education back in the early 2000s. And that was, you might say, well, what is an IO psychologist doing in security education? Well, it was kind of a new field. It was like cybersecurity. It was developing this computer-based training, which was a novel idea at the time. And it was to inform people of the cybersecurity risk that existed from like nation states and things like that. To the employees of to the folks that worked at the National Reconnaissance Office. Really enjoyed that. And then I was playing kickball at the time, and one of my friends on the kickball team was like, hey, you got a security clearance, right? Have you ever considered working for IBM? And I was like, oh my gosh, I would love to work for IBM. I mean, I enjoyed Booz Allen very much. As I mentioned, my mom had those big machines, right, in the house, these big IBM computers. So I thought, well, that would be cool. So I interviewed and was fortunate to get the position. And I was at IBM for 8.5 years and really grew up in my career there. I was at the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, and I started off doing their climate survey, kind of an IO psych type thing, right? Looking at how happy people were there because nobody's an employee of the National Reconnaissance Office. People come from all the COCOMs and services and the different intelligence community factions, and a lot of contractors are there as well, in order to work together at the National Reconnaissance Office. So it was a lot of kind of like in the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, it was a lot of team building stuff. Then I went on to lead the Mission ConOps team. And when I left IBM, I was the Deputy Director of Enterprise Architecture with over 50 folks on the team from about 30 different companies. So that was a really cool experience because over the years, there were over 1,000 folks on that contract. And we assisted every portion of the mission as well as acquisition and enterprise architecture. So that was really cool. And it was interesting. One day, I was in my office there, and my colleague came in and he was like, hey, you know, I know you always talked about getting a PhD. Are you still considering that? And I was like, oh, you know, I was going to do that in psychology. I wouldn't be able to work if I did that. And I really like what I'm doing now, so probably not. And he was like, oh, well, this is in systems engineering. And our contract was a large systems engineering contract. And I was like, oh, well, that sounds interesting. Where's that at? And he's like, oh, it's George Washington University is offering it. And there are a lot of people from NGA that are going to participate, a lot of contractors and government folks. And it's actually in Ashburn. Don't you live in Ashburn? And at the time I did. And I said, oh my gosh, that's like right down the road. I'm going to do this. It's like on the weekends. It's made for working professionals. So I called my husband up and I said, hey, you know, go back to, I'm going to go get my PhD. What do you think about that? He's like, great. So, so I did. So I have a PhD in systems engineering, and I was working at IBM at the time, and you know, in the position I just spoke of. And one of my colleagues from the contract I ran into them in the halls at NGA one day, and he sure, let me explore it, right? So he put me in as an employee referral, and after I spoke with some folks and I got the position, and I actually I saw a position there was for cybersecurity director, and I was like, this is interesting. And I read the job description. I was like, okay, like systems engineer. Someone with intelligence community background, new emerging field. I worked in security education at the National Reconnaissance Office and had done a lot of security enterprise architecture related items at IBM. So I thought this might be really cool. So I applied and I ended up getting the job. And at the time, the GM had said, hey, you know, I am hiring folks out of the intelligence community because I have an idea that like in the next decade or two, cybersecurity is going to be a really big challenge for our clients and customers. And we need to get ahead of that. And we need to offer our customers services to help them be more secure on the Microsoft platform. I said, well, that sounds really cool. And he's like, it's kind of a new group, no rules. We're kind of incubation, like a little incubation shop funded by large Microsoft. And I said, sign me up, right? I was able to leverage my systems engineering hat there a lot. He was like, hey, here are 4 dudes with an idea. Can you, translate what they're doing to something, a service we can offer our customers that would benefit them security-wise, and that we could, will be worth paying for as well, right? I said, sure. So worked with my team to build out the first identity and access management services team at Microsoft, which was really cool. Back in, gosh, it was 2012 timeframe. And stayed at Microsoft for 9.5 years, really loved it. Worked in different areas of services with both global governments as well as global industry. I won't name the clients, obviously, but global Fortune 100 companies. I'm gonna take this opportunity to take a sip of water because I've been talking for quite a while. And a quick time check, so that way I get to the back half of the presentation here. All right, I think we're good on time. So at Microsoft, I really enjoyed the work I was doing, we were talking about zero trust architecture, over 9 years ago, and looking at capabilities we could build into the platform. So I was in services and help build out those teams and work with those customers to solve their cybersecurity challenges. And then had the opportunity to actually lead an engineering team within Azure Global for advanced cybersecurity capabilities. So we were looking at what I was doing with my team is looking at the strategy from where are we today, what should we offer our customers today, and what capabilities do we need in the coming years in order to keep our customers secure on the Microsoft platform. Like what do we need to build in here? And I'll give you one for instance, because it's a really cool, for instance, that's a capability in the platform. So the capabilities of there's a privileged access workstation, a secure access workstation. Those capabilities are still resident today. The MIM-PM capabilities, the services my team and I developed, which is just in time, just enough access to administrative and other roles within Azure was early times. Our services team offered that up. So when I was in Azure Global, we were looking at how do we help move the Department of Defense clients onto the secret cloud? Like how can we help expedite this for them? And ATO, which is authority to operate, is something that's big in the Department of Defense. It pretty much in layman's terms means that you're allowed, the organization has the permission to use the technology and onboard people to that technology. That's very basic, right? But it's proven and secure. So one of the big hurdles was there are these security and technical implementation guidelines, or STIGs. And the STIGs are what the Department of Defense, as well as anybody who works with the Department of Defense, like the Defense Industrial Base, the over 20,000 companies that are in the Defense Industrial Base need to be compliant with to operate in the secret environment. There's a host of other security items as well, but that's the big kahuna, right? So I was working, my team and I identified this and said, hey, maybe we can create a landing zone within Azure that already has these security capabilities enabled, right? So that way it just kind of point click and they can be up and running in the environment very frictionless. Because within Azure Security Center actually has over 100, nearing almost 1,000 security frameworks within it, meaning out of the box. And I'm explaining this just because it kind of really goes with the back half of my conversation around security regulations and standards and how that really kind of drives the behavior we see in the industry. So we built an early point of proof of concept. You could see it on my LinkedIn site on this out-of-the-box capability for STIGs. We called it kind of a hydrated instance, a hydrated landing zone. And now it's fully built into the platform, because with that, we really needed to work with my colleagues to explain to them what a STIG was, who weren't in the Department of Defense, why it was important, and why these capabilities should be inserted into what their product teams were going to be working on for that year. Why we needed to do this so quickly. So anyway, that's just one example of some of the cool stuff that I got to do there that I'm really proud of, because their capabilities didn't exist before that now do. So from there, I actually had a headhunter reach out to me and say, hey, have you considered Accenture? And I said, well, I'm really happy at Microsoft, but let me, it's worth the conversation. And had the great opportunity to move over to Accenture and actually lead the public services security industry team for North America, which was amazing. And proud to say that, with my teammates and I, we were able to grow the business pretty significantly in a short period of time by looking at the industry, where the industry was going, developing go-to-market capabilities that would really help our clients be more secure in the state and local government, education, nonprofits arena, and grew sales over 125% and revenue over 75% in a year. So really enjoying being able able to make that type of impact. I mean, in industry, we talk in revenue, right? But really the thousands of projects that those were to help make state and local governments and our critical infrastructure and our friends and families' data more secure to enable services is really what kind of why I really love working with government. And I really love working across, because I found that in industry, you know, the Fortune 100, Fortune 50 companies, you tend to be able to move very quickly to implement items. And sometimes in the government, you have to move a little bit more slowly just because there's more regulation and oversight which is needed in that arena, but really innovate very deeply, right? So I really like that juxtaposition. And I really find that, as I'll talk in a little bit, that a lot of the flow down from security standards and regulations in the intelligence community, the intelligence communities globally, right, internationally, the defense communities globally, global governments, really do translate over to industry and vice versa. So it's a nice kind of trade there. And I often see that what they're doing in the intelligence community, you know, this year, maybe they're doing in industry, you know, five years later, 3 years later, or something like that. There tends to be a little bit of a lag at times. Sometimes it happens a little bit more quickly, but that interplay is really, really cool. So, anyway, we had the opportunity, because our business was doing so well, had the opportunity to then was asked, hey, would you like to lead health and public services? And I said, yes. My default is yes, like go for it. Why not? I think from my upbringing and my parents saying, hey, you could do anything you put your mind to. Strike when the iron's hot and take the opportunity, right? What do you got to lose? So I really believe in that. So now I'll kind of move on before I move to the second portion of this talk, which is talking about, you know, the emerging trends in cybersecurity and IT. You might be sitting there thinking, well, everything just sounds like roses, doesn't it, for her? Right? Like, oh, joyful childhood and great friends, you know, very successful career. Well, you know, not all good things come to an end, but there was, you know, some strife along the way. I'm a cancer survivor, had a supportive, that was probably about almost 20 years ago. So, you know, there's a little bit of strife there, but really when I think about, like, you know, I mentioned those 4 portions of my life, that there's been a lot of, like, I would say, exponential growth in a short period of time. Right now, you're fortunate as one of them. So, you know, in the last year, I've really had a lot of big life events happen. And now that I've had some time to really kind of like process and spend some time just kind of getting renewed and refreshed and focusing on, you know, how I want to spend the next, you know, next few decades of my life. In the last year, I'm getting divorced, and I'm also, I was laid off. There were some mass layoffs at Accenture, about 20,000 folks near my level, and some restructuring there. But I, you know, have nothing but good things to say and have a lot of good friends there and references. Then both of my parents died within a week of each other, all within the last year. So, you know, I would say those are 3 big events. My friends and family and I joked that we're going to write a dramedy, maybe, you know, write a dramedy, have some of the bridesmaids cast. act in it, we'll see. But anyway, I share that to say that, you know, I've spent a lot of time kind of reflecting and in nature, and went on safari, and some of the pictures that I share with you will be from that safari, and I've just had a lot of time to you know, focus on the way I think, and the way my thinking has maybe changed over the last 4 decades. My birthday was last week, March 5th, so I'm 46 now. So anyway, I share all that because back to my psychology roots, people bring their whole selves to work, right? Whether you see it or not, whether they're open about it or not. And I find that understanding more about like the person and what makes them tick, as much as they, feel comfortable sharing. I mean, this is a lot here, right? Because I have 30 minutes, and I wanted to be very kind of authentic and transparent. And this whole thing is about, me sharing my journey. So I feel this pertinent to it. I think it's really important to kind of see where people are and meet them where they are and understand their hopes and their dreams and kind of where they're at with their personal, like their family lives and things like that, just to kind of to best support them at work. Because going back to my IO Psych roots, we spend a lot of time at work, right? We spend majority of our adult lives there. So it's important that people focus on something that they're passionate about and that they care about, and that they feel comfortable bringing their own flavor and their own flair and their own, joy and energy to the situation. So with that, enough about me. I'm going to go ahead and flip to the back half of this podcast. So let me just go ahead and move the slides. I guess I kind of talked without that. So I'll start here. So I like to keep things simple. And in general, when people ask me, hey, what are you talking with clients about these days? What do they care about? What are the key trends and emerging trends? I like to keep it simple and say, I'm talking to them about 1, being resilient, 2, getting strategic, and 3, embedding security in everything they do. And as I reflected on this last night, I thought, gosh, that kind of applies to life a little bit as well, right? So I'll infuse a little bit of that. What you're looking at here is actually South Africa. It's about 3 hours outside of Cape Town. And this was the beautiful sky view that I took with my picture that I took with my cell phone one evening after safari. So I thought I would, share that with you all. When we talk about being resilient from a cybersecurity perspective, what I think about is we need to plan for minimal downtime, minimal impact, really brace for when the attack happens. And I know it's cliche, everybody says, it's not when, but if, and it really is true, right? So really taking a look at assessing your risk profile, and we'll talk about, when I talk about get strategic, I'll get into the myriad of standards that are hot and emerging. But it's being able to brace for that impact and ensure that your business or, that your government mission or that your students, right, have access to the resources, the IT resources that they need. So the first thing I always talk to people about is about ensuring you have an incident response plan, ensuring you exercise that plan. So that way, when the time comes, very much like those firefighters, right, that I talked about earlier, the first time they fight a fire, they don't just roll up in the fire truck and be like, I'm here, can go fight the fire. No, they train, right? Everybody has a job. Everybody has a very specific role. There's a leader and there's people that follow. And there's some collaboration, right? But there's, when seconds matter, you need to execute via gut and practice sometimes, right? Cybersecurity incidents are quite similar, right? Having been at numerous cybersecurity attacks and seeing just the kind of the emotional roller coaster the clients go through, as well as because a crime has occurred, right? And in some cases, the thing that they've spent their lives work on, right? Is securing this environment. Maybe they're the domain administrator, or maybe they manage the cloud assets, or maybe, they manage the devices. And when these items are compromised, it kind of shakes you like, oh my gosh, what did I do wrong? What could I have done better? Oh, I caused it, like, because of, and it really is hard. So it's kind of a lot sharing, giving people grace, right? And nobody's perfect and people just do the best they have with the best resources they have, but identifying, practicing that plan so that way when the time comes, they know who to call. Maybe they outsource it. They know what set of vendors to call and to partner with in order to execute that. Let me get another sip of water. So that's kind of the plan. And, another way to exercise being resilient is a tabletop exercise, right? And a lot of the Department of Defense, they do war games and things like that on cybersecurity. And when you look at different organizations, I was with one organization once. It was a nonprofit, and it was in DC, and very large target, and very large donor base, very celebrity-driven donor base as well. So you'd say it's probably a pretty large target for any, hacktivist or nation state, anybody trying to gather reconnaissance or intelligence. And what was really interesting that I'll share with you all, which was expected, and probably some of you are going to be nodding your head, well, of course, right? But to some folks, eye-opening, is that around that table we had the chief operating officer, we had the chief legal officer, the chief financial officer, the chief information officer, the CISO, chief communications officer, right? And throughout that 3-hour tabletop, we gave them different this scenario of this emerging cyber attack, right? It was a ransomware attack. And what is very interesting is that the CISO spoke the least, right? They said, hey, I'll use a name, Kate, you have that, right? You know who to call when you have an attack. And Kate said, oh yeah, and they're like, okay, great. And that was it for the IT portion, right? So when you look at any cybersecurity challenge, it really is a business challenge, right? And it's a business issue. And the chief financial officer clearly was like, oh gosh, we have a very large donor base. What if they take this information, then people won't have trust in us. And the chief communications officer is like, oh gosh, like who do I notify first, right? Like, do I notify the donors? Do I notify the board? When do we come out with a press release, right? At what point in the attack do I come out with these items? And the chief legal officer is like, well, we do have cyber insurance, and I need to know when to call them, and legally here's this and that. So the dialogue was really helpful, and based off that, we were able to help them create a SOP on just kind of this outline, right, of what they would do when an attack occurred, generally speaking, right, a guidebook to focus on that they could then exercise on a regular basis. So that's one example of Be Resilient. There's numerous very technical implementations that we could talk about, but that is the 500-foot level, I would say. That's the step one. Minimize downtime, have a robust incident response plan, practice that plan. Now we'll move on to get strategic. So, we talk a lot about a precipice for change, right? Let me go ahead and change my slide here. Oops, went too far. So now we have get strategic, right? This is also, I think I turned off my camera. There we go. This is also a landscape I wanted to share that I took with my cell phone while in South Africa on safari. And you can see this is kind of the dawning of a new day, right? So I talk about being strategic. When you think about being strategic, a lot of things in life, there's a precipice for change, right? Cybersecurity isn't exactly sexy, right? It's kind of a lot of eat your oatmeal, exercise, eat your vegetables day in and day out, and keep grinding, keep increasing security, right? So oftentimes after an attack, money flows to cybersecurity, and people are like, oh gosh, maybe we need to do some more there. We like to get ahead of the game and talk to people about strategy beforehand. And I think now with when you see Google commercials on zero trust architecture during the Super Bowl and NFL football, and all the talk about cybersecurity and just all the data breaches and people being impacted by that in their daily lives, it's more of a commonplace item, and people are like, oh, of course we need to focus on cybersecurity. So what I'm going to say to you today is very different than I would say to you, 5-10 years ago, right? When we talk about get strategic, you definitely need a plan, cybersecurity plan, right? And you need to, as an organization, not you need to, as an organization, organizations have strategic plans. They have near-term, mid-term, and long-term plans. Similarly, cybersecurity plan, right? Having a cybersecurity plan that is near, middle, and long term to really think through that strategy and to be able to program funding on, right? So, resources are finite, we all know. So we need to do the best and the most impactful mitigations with what we have. And we need to prioritize, right? So what does that priority look like? So talk a lot for folks about, doing an assessment of where you are, and then identifying areas of opportunity to identify where you're going to go. right? So when we look at that, well, what does that look like? Let's dive a little bit deeper, right? Most of you probably heard, if you're watching this podcast webinar, about NIST 853, and there was just a new rev that came out. I remember when I was working on my dissertation, and several years ago, and was writing about the NIST cybersecurity framework and was able to provide comments on that when I was at Microsoft. And it was Rev 1, and now we see, Rev 5. Governance is in there now, which is great because people have realized, like, oh, this isn't an IT problem only. This is really a business problem and a process challenge, and we need standard operating procedures, and we need strategies. So, and we need to govern this whole process, right? So that is very, that just came out in the latest rev of NIST 853, Rev 5, which is great to see. We're also seeing a lot of talk about zero trust architecture, right? And some folks might be like, oh, zero trust, isn't that a buzzword? No, it isn't. NIST has had a standard on zero trust architecture for quite a while, or guidelines, right, they're called. NIST 800, NIST 800-207. And there's also NIST 800-171, which is CUI data, which is more relevant to say, government organizations that work with the government, in addition to zero trust architecture. So when we talk about zero trust and kind of what that means to folks and developing a plan in line with zero trust, I want to provide the macro, right? Because I talked about industry trends and about where intelligence and defense globally tends to go. I see a lot of corollaries to where industry is headed. The U.S. Department of Defense actually has a kind of an edict, right? A thou shalt for the entities to be zero trust or to implement zero trust architecture practices by 2027. And they always put their money where their mouth is. So there's also over 800 billion in funding that's identified in the National Defense Authorization Act. You can view that online. It's a there's an unclassified version of the publication. And so 800, when you see the Department of Defense investing 800 billion in cybersecurity, they're serious about it, right? And when you look at, I was just reading the other night, because that's what I like to do while I watch Netflix comedies, is read new cybersecurity laws and regulations. Seriously, I'm a nerd. It is the Director of National Intelligence came out with the top cybersecurity or the top threats, national security threats, and cybersecurity is in each section. It's mentioned 30 times with regard to nation states. And that document, just so that way you can look it up afterwards, is the annual threat analysis of the U.S. intelligence community. It came out in February of 2024, and it's from the Director of National Intelligence. So those assets, when people talk to you about cybersecurity and kind of where the industry is going and some of the trends, hopefully those citations will be helpful to you, that the intelligence community is taking it very seriously, as well as the Department of Defense. And you see, I mentioned the Google commercial on zero trust architecture, which was brilliant. And you see a lot of talk from Microsoft and a lot of the other vendors about zero trust architecture. It's about always verifying, right? Never trust, always verify, ensuring least privilege access, just-in-time access to credentials, and it goes across user, device, applications, data, automation, networks, and visibility and analysis, just to kind of share some of the pillars. Those are the Department of Defense pillars for zero trust architecture, of which there are 7, and they are very corollary to the zero trust architecture pillars. I believe there's 5 that's in 800-207. So hopefully those resources are helpful to you. I'll also share, I started off with 853 and zero trust architecture. That's kind of where we are in the movie, right? But when I talk about kind of where we're going in the movie and kind of the emerging trends, we talk about cybersecurity and AI, and people are like, oh, that's hype. Okay, I know, I've used ChatGPT. Tell me more here. Well, when you look at trillions of signals that come in a SOC, right? and petabytes of data. It's impossible for humans to sort through all that data. So we really need artificial intelligence, and at the nuts and bolts, coming from a statistics background, right, an ISpsych, and doing a lot of statistical analysis, it's algorithms, right? I mean, that's the simplistic definition of kind of what we're talking about here, kind of like the ones and zeros that I was talking about before. So when we look at that, it's taking a look at what the data is based on. And I'm sure some of you might have seen that the EU passed the AI Act a few days ago, which is really big. It talked about, I'd say some of the key nuggets out of that AI Act, and was about the folks the companies or organizations that create this generative AI to share their data sets. And some of those who might be a little less familiar be like, well, why in the world do I care? I mean, there's other items in there, but the one thing that I thought was really struck me was sharing the data set. From a statistics background, you derive your inferences and your statistical analysis from the data. If you have bad data, bad input equals bad output, right? So, and when we talk about data, we want to approximate, very statistics 101 here, we want to approximate the population that we're looking at. So I'll give you a for instance. If we care about what is the population of folks, I'll use green beer, since tomorrow is St. Patty's Day. What is the if I'm the green beer companies, what is the population of folks that are probably going to drink green beer, right? You'd want to look at what are the population of folks that maybe consume the most beer in the world, right? Okay, I'm just totally making stuff up. This is not based on fact as far as the numbers, but for illustration purposes. Let's say they find that 20 to 30-year-old men drink the most beer, right? So then they say, well, who's out on St. Patty's Day and who would drink the green beer? Okay, what subset? So if they wanted to go out to a survey of people in their 20s and 30s, they probably want to do males and females, right? If they wanted to see if females drink beer and how they could make this green beer more appealing to the female population. They also want to have a diverse sample set. Do they just want just white people drinking their beer? No, I don't think so. I think they want white people, Latino people, Black people, all Asian people, all people drinking their beer, so they can have the broadest swath on the market, right? So they would need to ensure that their data set approximated that population in an appropriate percentage, right? That they interviewed enough, Black, Latino women, that they interviewed enough, Asian men, right? So that's kind of what we're talking about here when we talk about the data set. Because if you just had white men in that population and you said, oh, okay, yes, globally, here's the way we'll make the green beer look so it's appealing, they're going to miss the mark. And when you look at generative AI and the generative AI models, you all have seen some of the bias that's in the models. So it's really important to ensure that the data that the models are based off of is sound and approximates whatever population of folks that you want to derive inferences from. So anyway, we also see in the US, we've seen, the executive order on artificial intelligence, right? And about, how we have responsible AI, and they cite the AI RMF, which you can find on this site. They talk about the SBOM, the software build of material. I think a lot of you probably remember some of the attacks that occurred a while ago, where there was poisoning of GitHub repositories of data, right? And how that impacted numerous organizations that use that data because there was an inject that was inserted in there. The SBOM tries to eliminate that. It's kind of the ingredients package to the software or the hardware with software on it, so you can see what is contained within it. There's the Tufton and Toto frameworks, and then OpenAI that talks a lot about how they're going to focus on the SBOM, and there's a whole Tiger team with NIST focus on that. Worked a little bit on that from Microsoft perspective when I was there. Also within within the realm of AI, we talk about the National Vulnerabilities Database and the Cybersecurity Vulnerabilities Database, which have been around for quite a while. I was writing about the NVD when I did my dissertation on the intersection of systems engineering and cybersecurity. It continues to evolve. If you haven't looked at it, it's a fascinating data set. What it is it's all the known attacks that have ever occurred. The US government catalogs them and makes them available open source on the internet. And it talks about different attack patterns and then attack mitigations for those attack patterns. So it's a wealth of knowledge, and a lot of the AI and the algorithms that are built into technologies like, you think about your Sentinel technology, your Copilot technology within the Microsoft suite, those assistants, they look at all the known attacks, right? And then they have algorithms to predict, maybe to predict 0-day attacks. The other cloud vendors, such as Google and Amazon, also have a lot of that technology, and any, cybersecurity capabilities or any application folks, your Workdays, your SAPs, they all have monitoring built into their technologies as well. And then you have technologies that are just monitoring technologies. But they leverage these attack patterns as well as a lot of the standards in order to develop secure technologies. Let me think here. Let me see if there's anything. I was taking making some notes just to make sure that I was pretty robust in the conversation that I had with you all. And secure by design, as we all know, is very important and really highlighted within that EO. Let me do a quick time check, and then I'll get into kind of the third area. And we're already kind of hitting on the fourth area here, which is the third area of my slides, which I thought it was a funny picture. So, which is embed security in everything you do. So what we have here is, you see the lion on the left side, right? I took that picture with my camera on Safari. Well, you see on the right side, and I tried to zoom out of the picture because I didn't want to offend anybody because it was a little graphic up close. But you might say, well, how in the world did you get that close to a lion? That's not very smart. Well, defense in depth. That lion is on a very large reserve where it has a very beautiful life, and it is, but there are bounds to it. After miles, there's, fencing, so that way it can't get out. That's kind of a little bit of the perimeter. And then within there, you could see that they brought us in as the lions were kind of ending their feeding time. They went through several chickens that day, and that's kind of what that lion is gnawing on in the back. And that's me in front of it. It was kind of a windy day. So anyway, I thought that was just kind of a funny picture to talk about embedding security and everything you do. And we really kind of hit on some of that. And then we, I'll pop over to embedding security, but when we think about, I talked a little bit about zero trust, about the 853 revisions, talked about cybersecurity and generative AI and responsible AI and some of the emerging AI standards that are really going to assist us in cybersecurity. And then everybody, has probably heard about the post-quantum encryption and the need to focus on algorithms that can't be broken by post-quantum encryption or by post-quantum computing. And there's some, I don't have it in front of me at this moment, but there are some emerging guidelines that NIST has, and actually a working group. And NIST is the National Institute of Standards and Technology. I know it's a bit US based. I find though that a lot of the standards tend to translate. We talked a little bit about the EU AI law that was that just got passed, and it's kind of also in line with the executive order on AI that was put out in the US. So these, these standards kind of trickle around and are very similar, and the globe builds on one another. Different governments build on one another. So if you're interested in post-quantum encryption and assisting with trying to develop those that type of encryption to make that world secure, NIST has a working group that you could join. So anyway, I think we're nearing our time of me just chatting at you, and those are the key areas that I wanted to cover from a momentum perspective. And when we talk about embedding security and everything you do, those standards and guidelines have best practices for doing that. So we'll go ahead and move, I'll just stay here. And I think we're going to be moving to the Q&A portion of this chat soon. I wanted to, though, thank you again for your time, if you're still with me. And or if you tuned in for a little while, thank you. It's an honor to have time to tell you a little bit about me and my background and my journey, and share with you what I see as the emerging cybersecurity and IT trends that we're working with currently. And please reach out to me on LinkedIn and share your stories. And also, as I mentioned, I am seeking new opportunities. So if you don't ask, you can't get. So please hit me up if you're looking for a cybersecurity executive as well. And with that, Hakrita, I'll put it over to you and look forward to the conversation with those who'd like to chat.
Thank you so much, Michelle. It was a really great session, and people should understand how CISO stories are and how difficult or like exciting or what kind of roller coaster a CISO actually face in their entire journey. Thank you so much. So before we go to the Q&A, as we don't have much time, today's webinar is in sync with our CCISO certification. Certified Chief Information Security Officer is an executive level program that covers what you should know about information security from an executive management point of view. It combines all the components required for this C-level position, including audit management, governance, IS controls, human capital management, strategic program development, and financial expertise. Over 6,000 CISO jobs opening, and an experienced and certified CISO professional in the US can earn between 200,000 to 260,000 USD per annum. If you are interested to know more, kindly take part in the poll which is conducted right now. So our first question, I'm taking Michelle. Are there any challenges you believe are specific to women in the cybersecurity field, and how can these be addressed?
Yeah, as I reflect on my career, I think that earlier in my career, I felt I needed um, to kind of be a chameleon, to kind of fit in, to blend in, to camouflage in with the net of folks, and in a way of at the meeting, whether I spoke up or how I spoke up or when I spoke up, right? I was often in rooms back in the day with just men who were significantly older than me, who I learned a lot from. And as I've grown in my career, I've seen more women enter the field, more diversity in the field. We still have a long way to go, but I'll just share that that was my experience. And as I was never afraid to speak up. Probably tell I'm pretty chatty and like to share the information I have, because I like to make data-driven decisions and have the data to back it up, and then go with my gut. I'd say confidence, and gaining that confidence and really truly believing in yourself is really important, because you have the knowledge, right? You've done the schooling, you've done the work. Of course, everybody has more to learn. We're always have a very much of a growth mindset. I love to read. I love to look at new technologies. I would say believe in yourself, believe in that training. I know a lot of women talk about imposter syndrome, but you're in that room for a reason. And if you're not in that room, get in that room, right? If you have an opinion, if you have value to add, the worst that could happen is somebody interrupts you, or that or that you learn something, which is really, really great. So I'd say be fearless, go for it, trust your gut, and believe in yourself.
Thank you so much, Michelle. We will take our last question, as like we are already exhausted with our time. How do you envision the future of cybersecurity with increased participation from women?
Yeah, you know, I think that I've read a lot of studies that say more diverse teams are more productive teams and more innovative teams. That's why I like to build diverse, productive, innovative teams, so that way we can solve the challenges with all our different perspectives. So I believe as we see more women enter the cybersecurity field, we're just going to get better results, right? Because the more diverse our teams are, the more different ways of thinking, diversity of thought, people from different backgrounds entering cybersecurity just provides more energy. And as we've seen with the emerging standards, you know, governance is an item, training is an item, you know, developing the next technologies and really an ear to the industry is an item. And that, you know, doesn't only lend itself to people with an IT degree, right? That lends itself to people who have systems engineering degrees, who have cybersecurity degree, maybe who have a you know, economics degree, a finance degree, but have come to cybersecurity and bring those perspectives with them, because cybersecurity is a business challenge, right? And we are seeing that more and more, and people are starting to realize that more and more. So I'm really excited about all the energy and new people from diverse backgrounds and diverse thought that are coming into the field.
Well, thank you so much, Michelle, once again for answering the questions and for the great presentation and the knowledge shared with our global audience. It was a pleasure to have you with us, and we are looking forward for more and more sessions.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you all for your time today. Have a great day.
We are ending the session. You all may disconnect your lines. Thank you.
Thank you.